All right, let's continue with part two.
When you buy chicken feed from a reputable feed manufacturer, there is an actual nutritionist that calculates out the nutritional need for the stage of production of those chickens. You'll see the bags labeled with specific stages of production. So chick starter, broiler, grower, finisher, layer, breeder rations, okay? So those are complete feeds. They provide 100% of the nutrients that those animals need. And then a lot of times folks like to feed scratch grains to chickens. And this is a good way to kind of bond with your chicken. You know, if you just want to go out and throw some a little bit of scratch grain out to them to let them scratch around on the ground. It's also a good way to train your chickens to follow you around. So if you turn them loose in the yard during the day and you want to put them up at night, you can use the scratch grains to kind of lure them back into the coop to get them trained to come back in so you can lock them up at night so predators don't eat them. But you want to keep the scratch grains limited because grains don't contain a lot of vitamins and minerals. So if you feed a large portion of scratch grains, those chickens are not going to get all the vitamins and minerals that they need. How much feed would you need to raise a broiler type chicken? I can tell you off the top of my head that if you want to raise an average size broiler chicken, it takes about 15 pounds of feed per bird. So if you were going to raise 50 Cornish cross birds, you're going to feed about 8 bags of feed. And so this chart's really handy. I'm not going to read you the chart. We can send you the video and the PowerPoint later so that you'll have this for your reference. Here's a similar chart for laying hens. So if we're going to raise our laying hens from the start, it's going to take about 7 to 9 bags to get them to laying age for 25 pullets. And once they start laying eggs, it's going to take about 3 to 4 bags each month to keep those 25 laying hens happy and producing eggs. Now, folks love to feed their chickens table scrap, garden trash, lawn clippings, all kinds of things. So what's safe to feed your chickens? You can feed chickens shredded carrots. You can give them any kind of green vegetables or leaves off the green vegetables. You can feed them any kind of cooked leftover vegetables. They can have weeds from your garden or lawn clippings as long as they don't have any herbicides or pesticides applied to them. So that's just fine. You can see these chickens are having fun pecking at this pumpkin. I will caution you, though, that these green vegetables and things don't have a lot of nutrition in them. They're mostly fiber and water. And if you overfeed vegetable trash to chickens or these scraps to chickens, they'll eat less of their regular grain, and you are essentially diluting their diet. So their diet, that feed is calculated to meet 100% of their needs. So if we dilute that diet, they're not going to get all the energy, protein, minerals, and vitamins that they need. So in moderation, it's fine to feed your chickens these other things. Now, how do we store our chicken grain? This is very important. There are some good pictures on this page, and there are some bad pictures on this page. So the first thing, that feed needs to be kept in a clean, dry, cool environment. And the second thing, it has to be rodent proof, because if you don't have rats now, you will eventually if you're storing them. This is a metal trash can. They make great feed containers. They're portable, they are rodent proof, and they have a good lid on them that a raccoon can't knock over. If you're storing a large amount of feed, old deep freezers work great because they have a metal housing, gasketed lid on top, and rodents can't get in there. I really like using old chest freezers for large storage. Here's a 55-gallon metal drum. Of course, that is super safe and secure. And then up here on the left, we have a wooden box. Rodents will chew through a wooden box. Also, wood can absorb moisture and grow mold and harbor toxins. So wood is not a good choice from a moisture control issue or a rodent control issue. And I never, ever recommend plastic trash cans, plastic totes, or plastic containers to store feed in. because rodents will absolutely chew through those things. And if you don't have rodents now, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you will get them. Rodents multiply very quickly. I believe I read here today that one rat can have up to 80 babies a year. One mouse or one rat can quickly turn into a horde of animals. And once they get to that shape, they're really hard to get rid of. There's lots of different styles of chicken feeders. And they all pretty much work equally well. I much prefer to hang feeders. They do a lot better if they're up off the ground. If they sit directly on the ground, they'll get moisture up underneath of them, and you'll get mold and nastiness and bugs and maggots and all kinds of stuff that get up under, and it just gets dirty and nasty. But if you hang that an inch or two off the ground, it gets good airflow under there, and you never have nastiness and grossness underneath those feeders. So if you're handy, you can make your own feeder from a PVC pipe. You can buy commercially available feeders, and the more chickens you have, the more bunk space, so to speak, that you need. So you can see in this picture, there are more chickens wanting to eat than they have space. So in these two situations, these chickens need an extra feeder added so that they're not fighting for feed. And waterers, just like my recommendation for the chick brooder waterers, I like these hanging nipple style waterers. They just work great. And sometimes they can leak a little bit, but that's okay because it still makes way less of a mess than the ones that sit on the ground. Now, if you, for some reason, just absolutely hate the idea of using a nipple waterer and you want to use just a regular gravity feed waterer, just like the feeder, hang that an inch or two above the ground. And not only will that prevent the chickens from getting it as dirty, it will also keep that nasty stuff from gathering up and underneath the bottom of the waterers. But water is critical. They need to have access to water 24 hours a day because it is the first limiting nutrient in the chicken's diet. So here's a whole bunch of different chicken waterers. Here's the old school metal galvanized gravity feed waterer. Here's a modern plastic waterer. Here is a commercially available nipple waterer. Now you can go buy a 5-gallon bucket for $4 and buy a 4-pack of chicken nipples for $3 or $4 and make a 5-gallon chicken waterer, for less than $10. And they work great. We do that on all of our large flocks for research and my own personal flocks. But I also like these commercial available ones. I believe this one's from Tractor Supply because the bucket is see-through and I can just look into the coop and see exactly how much water is in that bucket. I don't have to go look on top. And they come with lids so that the dust and the dirt doesn't get in there. And on top of that lid, I'll position that lid 12 o'clock and I'll position the handle at 3 and 9 o'clock. And when I go to fill these up, I can just hang it on the water spigot outside and turn the faucet on and it just fills it up and hangs it. Because you can't really set these things down because they got those nipple waters on the bottom. So those work great. In the wintertime, you can buy heated waterers. So up here on the right-hand quarter is just a regular gravity feed waterer, but it's got a heating element built into the base. Now, let me tell you, I personally own one of these, this brand of chicken waterer with the heater on it, and I absolutely hate it. And I will never buy another one ever again because the daggone thing won't stay screwed shut. So I can't tell you how many times I fill this up with water and I invert it back over and it grazes against my leg and it just undoes itself and spills out 3 gallons of water onto my pant leg or onto the shop floor. I'm not a big fan of this brand. And now we're going to get more into the housing aspect. These are always fun to talk about chicken houses because there's such a wonderful variety. So here's a really fancy chicken coop and it's got an outside run. And you can see that this is protected on the top because predators come in many forms. Most places, the #1 predator we have to worry about is domestic dogs. And then probably the second most predator we have to worry about are raccoons. And a lot of folks think that raccoons are just quirky little trash pandas, and they're not dangerous to livestock. But raccoons absolutely will kill and eat your chicken. There are also foxes and bobcats and coyotes and snakes and bears and badgers and ermines and birds of prey like eagles and hawks. The cage on top prevents animals like raccoons, bobcats, and birds from getting to your chickens from the top. The reason I love this picture so much is you'll see on top of this roof is this vented steeple. Chicken coops need to be clean and dry, but well ventilated. Even in the wintertime, chicken coops have to be well ventilated. That's one of the number one mistakes I see with folks building any type of livestock barn or enclosure is they are not well ventilated. You know, if you hold a mirror up to your mouth and you breathe onto that mirror, you'll see water condense on the mirror. So the same thing happens when the chickens breathe. So if in the wintertime we close up the coop like a tight box, they're going to put a lot of humidity into the air, which is going to create dampness and stale air. And those chickens are going to get cool and cold because of the dampness in the air, and they're going to get sick from the dampness. So that even in the wintertime, it needs to be very well ventilated. And you want ventilation in the eaves and on top of the roof so that it draws air through and it keeps clean, fresh air going through. And you want safe wiring. You know, none of these hillbilly wiring jobs with exposed electrical boxes or 13 electrical cords plugged into a surge protector and so on and so forth.
We had a question about what a good heated waterer would be.
Yeah, we've got some examples here.
Okay.
A little bit. Now, Donna said someone asked about how much space do chickens need. Your laying hens, if you've got them in a coop, they need about 3 square foot per bird. If you've got them out in a paddock style, like if you've got a chicken run, you want 8 to 10 square foot per bird. And on their roost, you know, the perches they sit on to sleep at night, they need about 9 to 12 inches per bird. Okay. Now, meat birds, if we've got those in a barn or a chicken house, they need 2.5 square feet per bird. But if we have them in a chicken tractor that we move every day onto fresh grass, we only need 1.5 square feet per bird. Now, I mentioned perches or roost space. This is a big deal, especially here in Maine. Perches shouldn't be super tall, so we want to keep those at 3 foot or less. We want to make sure that each rung of the perch is about 18 inches apart and that they have 9 to 12 inches of perch space per bird. I really like having these step style perches because the chickens will establish a pecking order and they'll have buddies and then they'll have enemies. And this gives chickens that get along, and the top dog chickens, they'll go up on the top perch, and they'll have chickens on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tier. This particular perch is constructed so that it collects chicken droppings into a tarp. The one in the background has got a sliding tray that collects chicken droppings, so it makes it real easy to clean those. The one on the right is constructed with a 2x4 laid on its side. So the broad portion is what contacts the chicken feet. That's very important. A lot of folks think that chicken perches should be, you know, 1 inch or 2 in diameter because then they can wrap their whole feet around it and get a good grip. Well, what that does, it gives them a less stable platform for them to sit on, but more importantly, it exposes their toes to frostbite. Chickens keep their feet warm. So you can see these chickens up here on this perch. They sit on their feet and then they ruffle their feathers up around their feet to keep their feet warm. So if we use a 2x4 turned broadside, like in this picture, the whole foot of the chicken can sit on top of that 2x4 and the chickens can lay on their feet and you will have no frostbite toe issues. Now, if you turn that 2x4 the other direction or use a small diameter stick like in the picture in the background, the toes of those animals will hang below the perch and be exposed to the cold weather, and you will get frostbite issues on those toes here in Maine. So want at least a nice broad perch. A 2x4 laid flat is about as good as you can get. And then we have nesting boxes. So when it comes time for those birds to start laying eggs, they need a good place to lay their eggs. Unless you have ducks, and ducks just lay eggs willy-nilly all over the place. You can find those everywhere. But chickens like to have a nesting spot. So we can do that by creating a nesting box. And ideally, a nesting box is 18 inches off the ground, and it's 12 inches wide by 12 inches long, and at least the back side of it's got about 12 inches high. And the front of it is only 4 to 6 inches high, and that gives them a chance to get in there and see out and everything. And you can fill it with either sawdust or straw or hay or something. Makes great nests. If you use sawdust in either your chicken brooder or your chicken coop or your chicken nest, use coarse shavings and not fine shavings or fine sawdust, because that will cause respiratory issues or issues with their eyeballs from all the dust. You want to clean out your nesting boxes periodically, because that's a great place for disease to gather. You can see this person has bought a plastic tote. That's real easy to move out, clean and sterilize, whereas wood is much more difficult to clean and disinfect. How many boxes do you need for your chickens? You need 1 box for every 5 chickens. So if you've got 20 chickens, you need at least 4 nesting boxes. And you'll find that chickens get competitive over their nesting boxes, and they'll decide, I want slot 1, and everybody, and then you'll see them kind of like piling all their eggs into 1 box. That's pretty normal behavior, so don't get frustrated with them on that.
You have a question on the difference between buying nesting pads as opposed to hay or shavings.
I have never utilized nesting pads, so I don't know a whole lot about them.
I'd heard that sometimes they're too porous, and you have to keep them clean and sanitized, so it may be harder to keep them clean.
And I don't know what they're made of, so I really can't speculate on that. But anyway, let's go back here. Here's a good example of a chicken coop. We have perches that are about 3 foot off the floor, and we have nesting boxes that are about 18 inches off the floor. We've got a good cupola up here with adjustable vents so that we can let air in and out as needed. And the door has a litter board, so every time you walk in and out of the door, you don't spread chicken litter on either side. But there's lots of different ways to house chickens. And some people get really creative. Look at this old Volkswagen Beetle is converted into a chicken coop. Here's kind of a one that you would buy at the feed store. Here's one a deluxe one you would buy at the feed store. This person has millionaire chickens. They get their own little mansion with covered porch area and a hammock even, and their own garden and everything. Pretty nice. Portable coops are a great way to keep the chicken yard clean and keep grass up. If you have a chicken yard, you can see this coop was just constructed and hasn't been used very much because there's still green grass growing there. The chickens will scratch, peck, and eat that grass until it's gone, and there's just going to be a dirt lot if you keep them there over an extended period of time. These portable coops are really nice because sometimes you can see they've got open bottoms, so just every day or two you can move it over some, and then you're never going to get down to bare dirt on the grass. And it's a good way to fertilize areas and whatnot. These particular coops are designed for laying hens on pasture. So this pasture is going to have a electric netting fence around to protect the chickens and let them wander around. And then they can get in the coop at night. And the nesting boxes are built onto the outside of the chicken coop. So when you go to gather up eggs, you can just lift this door up, reach in, grab the eggs, and you don't have to go into the coop and disturb the chickens. So those are very nice. And we mentioned all the different kinds of predators, but the most important picture, this slide, is you see this little varmint here is going through chicken wire. And he's not the only predator that can fit through chicken wire. A raccoon will reach his arm through chicken wire and grab chickens and pull them out in little pieces. And this, I've seen this happen a lot. So chicken wire is not good enough to protect your chickens from predators. You need, at minimum, 1/2-inch hardware cloth, or better yet, 1/4-inch hardware cloth, to protect predators from going through the fence. Now, here in Maine, we don't have snakes, or not a lot of snakes, so that's usually not a terrible concern, but we do have those little ermines, and they'll go through chicken wire and eat your chickens, no problems, okay? We also have fox, bobcat, coyotes, dogs, and stuff that burrow underneath the fence or climb on top of the fence. So when you construct your chicken fences, it's always a good idea to have some kind of anti-digging or burrowing barrier. So this is just a fence placed on the ground to keep stuff from burrowing under, and stuff on top to keep the bobcats from going over, the coons from going over, or the eagles from coming in and eating your chickens. If you free range your chickens and hawks and eagles figure out that chickens make a good meal, in short order, they'll eat 1 chicken a day until they're all gone. Same thing for bobcats and raccoons. If they figure out they can just climb over your fence and go in and eat your chickens, they'll just start doing so on a regular basis. And predators are one of those things that they're not a problem until they're a problem. And then once they are a problem, they are a serious problem. We've had lots of questions on winter care of poultry. If you have good cold hardy chickens, you don't have to have super fancy heaters to heat the chicken coop, okay? But let's just go over a little bit more in depth here. So things that will freeze: water, eggs, and bedding, okay? And your chickens will freeze too. And if their combs and feet get frostbit, they'll turn black, fall off, and die, okay? Well, I mean, the chickens don't necessarily die if they get frostbite, but the combs and wattles and stuff will turn black and fall off, and they'll get stubby toes because their toes fall off. So we want to protect against things like that. And we do so by providing them a good, clean, dry coop with wide perches and only purchasing cold tolerant chickens. And we've gone over most of the rest of this stuff. But we do have an extension publication. It's called The Winter Care of Laying Hens that goes over this stuff in gory detail. So that's always good supplemental information. I don't know how many times I've said in this presentation, clean, dry environment, but it really, the #1 thing we can do to keep our chickens healthy and comfortable is always keep them a clean, dry environment. In the summertime, you know, they need a lot more airflow to keep cool. So a lot of times we'll have open windows or open vents, but in the wintertime, we can close those off with just some cheap plastic. Now, if you just staple plastic to wood, the wind is going to blow it off and it's going to tear to shreds. But if you take some boards and screw that plastic down with the board supporting it, that'll keep the plastic all winter long. Now, like I said, even though we want to close up the big holes and stuff, they still need that ventilation. They still have to have air circulating in throughout the coop. So the best thing that we can do to keep our chickens from freezing and the chicken water from freezing, because that's a pain to have to pack out or chip water, right, is insulate the coop. Now, if you use 18 R-value insulation on the wall and use 49 R-value insulation on the roof, and you keep that chicken coop draft free, but still has ventilation for the air to come through, the chicken's body heat will keep that coop warm enough that it won't freeze. It'll get close to freezing temperatures, but it won't freeze. And they'll stay nice, cool, clean, dry, and comfortable the whole time. The other thing that we can do to generate warmth for our chickens is use the bedded pack technique on the chicken litter on the floor. And that's where you would put in 4 to 6 inches of sawdust or hay or something. And then every week you go in and you turn it over with a manure fork or something. You don't haul it out. You just turn it over. Once it compacts down to 2 or 3 inches, you add 2 to 3 inches more of sawdust, and you just keep doing this for 6 months. Chicken poop and sawdust and everything will compost, and actually the process of composting will generate heat, and it's basically warming the coop from the bottom up. Okay, but you do have to get in there every week and turn that around so that it composts and not just get nasty and rot and stuff. And you don't have to clean it out, but about every 6 months. So twice a year you clean out your chicken coop instead of having to do it every week. If you're wanting to keep clean, fresh stuff in there constantly. We've talked about all of this stuff on the top, so we're not going to go back over it. But down here on the bottom are your most common cold tolerant chickens. Okay, and that's the Ancanas, the Australorps, the barn invelders. I've never actually seen one of those barn invelders around. You got the Dominics, the Favorolas, the New Hampshires, the Orpingtons, and the Wyandottes. Now, my favorite egg-laying chicken is a silver-laced Wyandotte, and I keep those at home. Now, do you have to heat your chicken coop? If it is constructed properly, no, you don't. They don't need a heater. If you live in like exceptionally cold environment and you feel the need that you should provide heaters to your chickens, don't use a heat lamp. Heat lamps used for extended periods tend to gather dust and short out and all kinds of stuff, and they pose a strong fire damage. Plus, they use a lot of electricity. You can actually buy these panel heaters or heating pads that use very little electricity, but generate just enough heat to keep the chickens comfortable and not freezing. If your chickens have access to outside, you can put some plastic flaps over the hole from them to go outside, and that'll keep them from freezing. Now that keeps the cold air draft out. You can put your heaters on a temperature control switch. That works nice. And if you're struggling with your waterers freezing, there's a couple different things you can do. So one, if you utilize those 5-gallon buckets with the nipple waterer, like I was talking about earlier, you can go to the hardware store or the feed store and buy a heating element that sits in the bucket and it keeps that water warm, and you just plug that in, and that will keep that water from freezing all winter long. And then you just fill up the 5-gallon bucket with water, and that will stay nice and warm all winter long. You can buy heated chicken waterers. We talked about those earlier. You can insulate your coop properly. I mean, sometimes that's cost prohibitive or you don't have time or whatever. I understand not everyone insulates their chicken coops, but if you keep it insulated just right, then the water just doesn't freeze, and you can just use whatever you're using the rest of the year. But go through your chicken coop, find the drafty parts. You know, if it's around the windows, use some caulking. You can use the flaps, like I said. You cover exposed areas with plastic or pieces of plywood. You can install some of these clear plastic roof panels that let sunlight in, and it heats the coop up through sunlight. That helps a lot too. If you do use electrical heaters, I mean, I hate to harp on fire damage, but we're talking about clean, dry environments with shavings and dry hay in it, so it's just ready to catch on fire. So we want to make sure that we do so safely by using proper extension cords. You want to look at your extension cord and see what it is rated for on amps and voltage, and match that to your chicken heaters or water heaters. You only plug one heater into one outlet. Okay, don't put the little 3-way plug into the outlet and then plug in 4 extension cords and 17 heaters, because that overloads the circuits. And what happens is those wires get warm and they melt the insulation. And then once the insulation melts, the 2 wires, the positive and negative wires, will touch each other and they spark, and that's how fires start. So make sure that we're using the electric correctly, and use a GFCI, that is a ground fault circuit interrupted electrical outlet. You'll see these a lot of times in your bathroom or in your kitchen. And what that does is if there's an electrical surge, it's basically a built-in breaker, and it will cut off the electricity and it keeps things from catching fire. So those are really handy. If you don't have a built-in GFI outlet, you can actually go to the store and buy one that plugs into your outlet. And I always use a GFI on heater stuff. Now I have kept y'all a good 15-20 minutes past our presentation limit. So I'm just gonna shut up now and see if there's any questions or anything that I can help answer from here.
And the questions we had, someone was asking about what to use to clean and sanitize the coop.
So that's a good question. And if you keep everything clean and dry throughout the year, you can just go in with your pitchforks and shovels and clean out the loose bedding and a broom and knock all the dust and cobwebs off, and you're in good shape. If it gets to the point where you gotta like do a deep scrub or clean, you really can't disinfect wood. You know, so if you were to go to a commercial kitchen or butcher or commercial chicken house or swine unit or anything, they're all made of things like epoxy concrete, metal, plastic and stuff. And that's because you can actually clean and sanitize those surfaces. Whereas wood is very porous and disease can get inside there. And no matter how much you scrub the outside, you can never actually clean the inside of wood. So it's usually better not to try, because then you just disturb everything and put it into the air. So routine maintenance to keep everything nice and clean is the best way. Change the litter out frequently, or use the composting bedded pack method. Nest boxes, clean those out frequently. For your own safety, you know, you probably should wear gloves when you clean out nesting boxes, but you know, we don't want to get too carried away with stuff. But yeah, clean that stuff out fairly regularly. And then just take your broom and stuff and knock down all the dust and cobwebs. But if you're dealing with wood and dirt, you really can't disinfect it. Now, if you've got those plastic totes using for nest boxes, you can absolutely clean and disinfect that. And you can use a bleach solution or a commercial disinfectant to clean those. You clean it with soap and water first to get all the crud and dirt off, then you put the disinfectant solution on there.
Someone was asking what type of chicken lays the largest egg?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know which chicken lays the largest egg.
I guess Leghorn.
Is it the Leghorn?
They're probably not the...
Yeah, not like record book, but commercially they lay the biggest.
Yeah, they consistently lay bigger egg. I guess we should say it that way.
Yeah.
And someone was asking for details on chicken tractors, and I posted your research project that you did.
Yes, that's a great resource for that. There are two styles of chicken tractor. One is the Salatin style, the Joel Salatin style, and those are about 2 foot tall, and they're just metal cages that sit real low to the ground. I don't like those for 2 reasons. Well, 3 reasons really. 1, I can't walk into them. 2, because they're so low to the ground in the summertime, there's a lot of radiant heat being transferred to the chickens, and they can't stay cool because they can't get a good breeze through there. So that's why I don't like those as much. I know a lot of people use them. And then there's the Suscovich style chicken tractors, which are like an A-frame that are tall enough where you can walk in. I do like those because, again, you can hang the waters and feeders, plus they get a good breeze through there. That's my opinion on chicken tractors.
Yeah. We had somebody ask, why are some reasons that chickens might stop laying eggs besides the daylight?
Oh, good question.
I'm going to end the poll now.
That's a good question. If chickens are stressed, they'll quit laying eggs. If they don't have adequate nutrition, they'll stop laying eggs. And if they get old, they'll stop laying eggs. And of course, if they're sick or something, they'll stop laying eggs.
What's your opinion on using sand on the coop floor?
Sand works pretty good. The reason I don't like sand is because it gets on my shoes and I track it into the house. and I hate that. It just gets everywhere. But as far as bedding it on the coop floor, it works pretty good. Here in Maine, though, sand gets cold, and it doesn't provide much insulation and warmth, so that's not as good. But there's nothing wrong with using sand.
Do you put their feed inside the coop or in the run?
I put it inside the coop, unless it's, there's a couple reasons for that. One, it doesn't attract as many rodents because rats and mice can find their way into the runs a lot easier. But really, you can keep them outside or inside. But two, the sunlight isn't bleaching it out. So if you leave the feed into like direct sunlight, the sunlight can actually bleach out the vitamins fairly easily.
What other treats can I give my chicks?
You can give them mealworms. You can go to the store and buy different scratch grains, all the vegetables and stuff we talked about. I know a lot of folks will, like in the summertime when it's real hot out, they'll go buy like frozen peas and different kinds of stuff and give to their chicks. And really, they eat just about anything. So don't give them meat, but most other things are okay. I'd say mealworms are probably the most common. Yeah. And if you buy like different kinds of seeds, make sure they're not salted, like peanuts or sunflower seeds. Buy the livestock feed grade ones that aren't salted.
You recommend diatomaceous earth?
No.
That was quick. When do you give grit?
Only if they need it. Most of the times, if you feed a complete feed, they don't need it. When you start supplementing other types of feed into their diet, more of the plant matter and the vegetables and grass clippings and stuff, then you may need to give them some grit. Same thing if you start seeing soft eggshells, misshapen eggshells, they may be calcium deficient, and you can give them oyster shells or something like that to supplement their calcium levels.
What kind of shavings are best for chickens?
Coarse wood shavings. Like if you go to the store and buy them, just request coarse shavings. The fine shavings or sawdust are very dusty, and they can cause problems with their eyes, and they can also cause respiratory issues. And that holds true for all livestock, not just chickens.
Softwood or hardwood?
Up here in Maine, we pretty much get softwood. There's no added benefit to getting the hardwood over the softwood.
Someone here says, I don't have a cupola for ventilation, but there are 3 windows. I can safely crack the windows in winter.
I would highly recommend, even if you don't have a cupola, go to the store and get some of those eave vents. They're like $1 or $2, and then you can just drill a big hole where the apex of the roof is. So in the highest part of the roof, on the sidewalls, drill you a couple holes, and then you can put that vent, and you can just nail that cheap vent on top of it. And that creates an airflow, because heat rises in the coop, so that air will rise up in the coop, and that moisture will gather up in the height until it gets too heavy, and then it falls out of the air. So if your only ventilation is like midway through the wall, that moisture can still collect in the top part of the roof. So it's always good to have a good vent on the eaves of the roof.
Someone's asking, is there a certain way to introduce younger chickens to older ones?
Yes and no. And this is a problem I just got through dealing with in my personal flock, because I throw my chickens in there. My little laying hen chicks got all their feathers at 3 weeks old and started flying out of the brooder. So they left the brooder, and I put them in the chicken coop. And of course, the 8-week-old chickens started picking on them real bad. And I actually just put a divider in my chicken coop so that the big chickens couldn't get to the little chickens. But I also put a mouse hole in the bottom of the divider so the little chickens can come out. And so the little chickens have their own food and water, because the big chickens are very protective of their food and water, so that they can be safe from the big chickens and have access to food and water. And over time, as they get used to each other, I'll remove that divider, and they'll get along just fine. But it usually takes a little time to keep them from picking on each other. Now, if you've got real young chickens, like they're still in the brooder, and say you get 2 batches and one's 2 weeks old and one's a couple days old, what I have found is I introduce them at nighttime. And so they just wake up and find each other. And they're like, no, they just must have been here already. And there's not as much trouble with those.
I see Ashley's on from Arizona. She says that they use sand in Arizona, but they deal with more heat than cold.
Yeah, you're not worried about chickens freezing in Tucson.
Someone asked, we only have, another minute. Is outside access necessary during the winter?
They don't have to have outside access to the winter, and in the summer or the winter, technically, but I usually leave mine access to go outside if they want to, and if they're cold, they won't go outside. I just do that so that they're happy chickens and they can just kind of go where they want to.
Someone read that buttercups are not good for chickens. Will they avoid them naturally?
I have never had buttercups around chickens, so I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, most livestock buttercups don't taste good. So as long as they have access to feed, they won't be tempted to get into any of the poisonous weeds. We've reached noontime. We still have a number of questions left. We can make sure that Colt goes through and responds to all those other questions and can send the responses and then a copy of this video and a copy of your slides to folks that registered. How does that sound? Well, Colt, we want to thank you for sharing the information on raising backyard poultry, and it sounds like most folks are more confident about raising backyard poultry. You had the slide on with your contact information so that if they have individual questions, they can get a hold of you. As a reminder, right now, Cooperative Extension offices are closed until June 30th. But we are all available either through email or through phone. So you can reach out to us, either Colt or me, if you have any questions. I did post the poultry website. I'll make sure that that's in the email when we send it to you. So thanks again, and you've been great, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.